Greetings, good people, and a very warm welcome to you all. So as I was rummaging through my stash of junk, I came across this piece and thought, ooh, that looks interesting, because the dial has so much science on it, and it's a calograph. I don't know what that means in horological terms, but it sure does sound exotic and complicated. And it has two chronograph pushers, so there must be an interesting movement inside. It also says Swiss made, so it should be beautifully detailed. They've also made a song and dance about it being jeweled on the dial. But I feel a bit shortchanged and my pants pulled down by this watch as I commenced on filming this one for you all. The brand is called Dore, which I've never heard of previously, so I've never worked on one before. So let's see how I get on with this one. Oh, and did I mention the dial says that it's jeweled, so there should be lots of shiny rubies inside. Now then, I don't usually get that annoyed by other tinkerers' buffoonery, but one thing that does drive me round the bend is when people use single-shouldered spring bars on watches where there is no hole in the lugs, because you just can't get them off without damaging the strap or scratching up the case. So whoever out there is doing such a thing, you better just stop it, okay?
So this is like a unibody case with access through the top. Would have been better if that notch was somewhere here, away from the crown and the pushers, so when you're levering with your knife you don't break the pusher or the crown. But whoever's reinstalled the bezel didn't line it up, so we've got the little notch just there.
That is one busy dial, and it's not a split stem or anything, so it's not like stuck inside a tube or anything, so it should gently lift out.
It doesn't want to come out, this bloody thing. I wonder if I have to remove the hands on the dial using these two screws, because it doesn't want to come out and I don't want to damage anything. Come on. We do have these two pushers here, which may be wrapped around. There's usually like a flexible piece of metal here that holds the pushers in without any screws or anything, so that's what might be stopping it from coming out. So let's remove the hands and the dial and see what's underneath. We can hack it. The only way this chronograph seems to be functioning is via some sort of hacking feature, because all you're doing is pushing one button to start it and one to stop it, and the balance stops. So you can hear completely the balance has stopped. It's not like the timekeeping part is continuing to work, which is a very simple and effective idea, I suppose. Why complicate things? So I can feel the dial already moving. And it's a Swiss movement, so it should be pretty nice inside. So that hasn't provided us with any additional help with removing the movement, but there is that little sort of spring that I was talking about, and usually that's what sometimes holds in the chronograph pushers. And we've got it, I think. That one should also just pop out, just like that. So we'll just free this jumper and it should just lift out. Just held in against the force of this jumper. Normally I'd just remove the balance and everything from the other side. But since we removed the dial and hands to figure out how to remove the movement, we'll just continue on this side for a bit longer. This looks like a very cheaply produced movement. We have a blue jumper spring, which might just be sort of chemically blued. We do need to remove this driving wheel for the calendar. I think that little dot here is the finger. That has revealed some markings and a caliber number, I think. It's a big friendly giant, the BFG.
So finally the movement has revealed itself. This is a BFG caliber 670, which is made by Baumgartner Frere Grenchen, founded in 1923 in Grenchen, Switzerland.
You can see that lovely bit of dried up grease. So we can let the power down. There's the click, weird little thing.
BFG no longer exists, but they were well known for making simple and affordable movements, which we'll find in low-end models from the likes of Timex, Secura, Seconda, and so on.
When you see a movement like this, don't expect the performance to be chronometer levels. It's a pin palette after all. And so check it out, instead of a roller jewel, we have this little piece of brass that provides the similar function. It's mental, isn't it? We're just used to seeing shiny red rubies on everything. And there's our simple pin palette, and it looks like it was made by someone who just chewed up a piece of brass with their teeth.
BFG movements are usually pin lever escapements without many or any jewels, and most often manual wind. A lot of you tinkerers will be familiar with the jump hour watches, which would most likely be powered by a BFG. And although our dial made a marketing song and dance about our watch being jeweled, so far I've only seen one jewel. So the marketing isn't untrue, but cheeky at best.
So that, look at that gunk on that escape wheel.
The BFG 670 movement doesn't usually have this annular balance whip, so I assume it was a retrofit by Dore, and it's basically a balance stop used simply to create a stopwatch function.
And that is the hack I was talking about earlier. So
all it took was a couple of extra parts to create a whole new complication on a dirt cheap movement. But sadly it doesn't reset or anything like that, and after you have timed your daily jog to the shop, you would have to ask someone on the street for the time in order to set the watch back to the correct time.
Like a little dragonfly.
Now I haven't been able to find any information on this. Now I haven't been able to find any information on this brand name, and haven't seen any other watches produced by them. So maybe it was a one-off commission for some sporting event. But if anyone has any info on Dore, or is it Dore, then please let us know in the comments. The base movement, however, was used by various brands from the 1950s onwards. Come here, you noisy little shit.
So as you can see, a lot of the screws for the bridge serve multiple purposes. Where we had one here for the pallet cock, and then for the springs, and we have two more here. One is dedicated for the bridge, and the other one is the setting lever screw. Oh, that is long. That is for the setting lever.
Apart from the obvious lack of jewels and refinements, this movement has taken many other cost-cutting design approaches.
That is a big ass mainspring barrel. And look at all that mess. Got some more lovely mess here.
Cost-saving measures include screws that serve multiple purposes, and everything is sandwiched in between these two basic plates. The mainspring barrel and its lid also play multiple roles.
Skate wheel, fourth wheel, and the third wheel, and the center wheel. The shaft has gone through the sleeve, then you've got this little, what the heck is that?
Earlier we saw a cost-saving click and spring combo, and here we can see a sort of return bar yoke spring combo, which looks like it was cut out with a pair of scissors. And look at that really cool screw with the thread at the top, and the rest of it just acts as a supporting column for the two plates.
Oh, look at that balance. This should give us access to that. Did you just say oh shit? That is a very dirty looking movement. So you would have to remove this little cap here to pull that center wheel through, and then somehow you'd have to rivet that back on, which seems like a lot of work for such a cheap movement. So I don't think that's what they intended, but it can be done. So if you look at the parts list, you can see that that center wheel is incorporated into the main plate. Otherwise it would have been listed as a separate part. And the same with the mainspring barrel lid. And if you remember that Omega Jedi video I did a while back, on that we had a barrel lid with a driving wheel, and the instructions from Omega were to leave it alone. But let's remove the lid first and see what happens. This is a really strange movement because the mainspring barrel seems to be doing all the work. The seconds hand, minute hand and hour hand all seem to be driven by the mainspring. So a bit like a cannon pinion on a standard movement, which needs to have enough friction to be able to allow hand setting and to drive the minute hand. On this barrel lid I can feel some resistance during rotation, so if you were to remove those wheels you would lose that friction. And those two wheels are not independent, they're moving together. So the way I would do it is to clean this in some LNR solution in a jar, but first I'd stick it in an ultrasonic to vibrate the oils out if possible. I'd then oil it around that rim as the oil would seep down around that tube. And honestly, I don't think a cheap movement like this would be designed to have such an extensive process during service. But in the interest of science and to show you guys how it can be done, I've bought a spare lid and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to fashion myself a little jig, and this is just a tool for hanging your balance. And you can see it's got that slit which is perfect for the underside of the lid. The lid also has a slot which can tuck up right against that screw. I also use a carpet knife blade which also has a cutout, so that can also tuck up close to that tube. Then I clamp the lid down on both sides, because when I lever the wheel I need the lid to be secure, otherwise it would be like trying to lift myself up into the air by pulling on my shoelaces. Once everything is secure, I want to lever right at that base of the tube where it meets the wheel to avoid it bending. So there's a huge well here, so if doing it my way, where we just oil around that tube rim, then I imagine any excess oil would happily sit in that well. And there you can see that flange which needs to be opened back out to achieve a tight fit. When I hand press the wheel back on, you can see how easily it rotates without any friction. This would probably result in your hands not moving, a bit like a loose satellite pinion on some AS movements. So a few taps with the cone-shaped punch opened up that tube and the wheel feels nice and tight. So, not bad for a fake chronograph stroke stopwatch. What are you so excited about?
So I'm going to clean that main plate and that barrel lid as I assume it was intended, but I'll do that extra step where I'll use some LNR solution in an ultrasonic to vibrate out any old oils.
Hey, why are you making all that noise? Did you sleep? It's okay, come on. So I've had to install the bridge to get the balance back in because the balance sits on top, and I didn't really see much coming out in the ultrasonic, so we'll stick everything into the basket and stick it into our main cleaner. The screws are so big, I'll just stick them straight in without having a smaller basket because I don't have any more space. There's some text in a rectangular border just there. I can hardly make out. The sides are quite nice. It's quite nice. It's just that back where it's been sitting on someone's very rough acidic wrists. So I'll give that a little clean and a little rub to see what happens. There's no point restoring this. We'll just get it looking tidy. And there's the pushers, which I think are just brass. No sort of finishing on it at all. Same with the bezel, just a bit of brass. But we can give that a nice polish and that will come up nice. And the plexi as well. We'll give the plexi a nice polish as well. Still reusable. Let's give that a wash first and see what happens. You can actually see the text now. It says font injectee. I don't even know what that means.
What does it mean?
Google Translate tells me that it means shut the hell up and throw it in the bin. And the bezels come out quite nice. There's no way that this is gold plated. I had a little scratch on the back and it does seem like it's all brass. We can give it a little polish with that cloth. Looks alright. Very therapeutic. Sometimes when I'm stressed, I'll just find something to polish by hand. It's looking nice already. Compare that to the little pushers. Give them a little clean as well. You can see the state of them. Now look at it. Just a couple of rubs. It's already looking nice. Not as dull as it was before. Do the same with the other one.
The top of the case is really nice. Doesn't look like much wear on it at all. See, it's just this case back. Let me get my steel polishing cloth, stainless steel, and give it a rub with that. And I don't think that's going to get any better. As for this plexi, it's a bit on the yellow side, so I'm going to polish it up first, get rid of all the scratches, and then see if I can get rid of that yellowing. Okay, so I've scratched the heck out of it, and that might be a good thumbnail picture actually to all my fellow YouTubers out there. You know what I'm talking about. So now I'm going to go down to find a grit and make those scratches smaller and smaller. The dark background shows you all those scratches that are still on there. So just work on those a bit more. Still a lot of big scratches on there. It's a very thin piece of plexiglass. Hardly anything there. I could replace it, but got nothing better to do. And let's move up to 1500. Now we go on to 2000. Don't have to use all these increments, but since I have all these increments, I'll just use them. Gives you a spectacle to watch, I suppose. Okay. Okay, you proved your point, mister. Well, let's move on. Ew. Better get a new one.
So I have seen guys out there who treated their yellow Nintendos with hydrogen peroxide to get rid of the yellowing. But after using the polywash on this plexiglass, it had this really nice smoky tint to it. So I think I'm just going to leave it as it is.
Everything looks nice and clean. There's a removable cap here, but doesn't seem to be a jewel. Just seems to be a metal stud. Look at the finishing on that main plate. Dear me. That's the other side. Let's see if we can finish that off a little better. That looks much better. Do this one as well.
That's what it looks like from the other side.
Now that part of the arbor is going to go all the way through that lid with those wheels on it.
And I'm going to do the same with this barrel lid. You should be able to see it disappear. Yeah, I think it's seeping down. I'm going to put some really light oil just here, and hopefully that should seep down. And it's better than nothing. It'd be best to start off with that intermediate wheel, then we can put that stem cock on. Put a bit of lubrication on there. So I've put that oil there, but I've realised that's going to have no effect whatsoever because that wheel is not even touching that base. So we'll remove that oil and put some on the post and some on this rim here, which is raised. Seems to be where the wheel sits. So you can see why we put that little bit of oil beneath that screw, because that wheel will be potentially rubbing up against that screw when rotating. What do you call it, man? I think we'll start off with this third wheel. The fourth wheel. Be interesting to get this 3/4 plate on. How tiny that hole is. Just there. And now we need to slide our mainspring barrel underneath the center wheel. And I think that's everything. I hope I haven't missed anything. I know the setting lever screw goes on top, so and I think I've got that in first time. Well, what do you know, Joe? That was a lot less painful than I thought. And the only screw that's not dual functioning to hold the two plates together is this one. So I'll stick that one in. I'll get the click in because I do need some more of those dual functioning screws. I'll also get the pin pallet in, and that should give us another screw. That should be enough screws then to hold in our 3/4 main plate.
And I think I've put some around the base of its screw, just there. And we mustn't forget the orientation of this screw as if you're undoing it. Ratchet wheel is also going to be just sitting right on top of that plate. Just get some around that where the screw head will be sitting. Do a bit of oiling. Uh-oh. Guess who's here? Hey.
My microphone is picking up a lot of static today, and Jeremy's playing all sorts of copyright music in the background. So I'll just go over some of the stuff I'm saying in the clips. So you can see the contact points here, and that's where we'll put a bit of grease.
Then we can spread that around. Feels much better.
I don't know what difference it will make, but I'm doing some oiling, and you can see these oil wells are more like craters that you see on the moon.
I'm curious to see what this little capsule is like, if we can call it a jewel, that is, because I think there's only one jewel on this whole movement. That's on the balance wheel, so it's just a metal bearing rather than a ruby, and that's how cheap this movement is. But we'll get a bit of oil on there anyway. So one jewel wonder.
So it seems like this mainspring barrel is running the whole show. This minute wheel here on the lid is running the cannon pinion independently, which drives our minute hand. And then this smaller wheel here seems to be driving the hour wheel independently. And then the hour wheel has another wheel stuck to it that drives the calendar wheel. Normally you'd see all sorts of separate wheels and intermediate wheels and pinions, but on this movement there's hardly anything. Then that fixed center second wheel is also being driven by the mainspring, which is running the seconds hand. So I'm surprised this date jumper and spring combination has survived the cleaning machine and the bluing is still intact, as it does seem chemically blued. What say? Well, hey.
Look how big his socks are.
Yeah. He wears leggings. He should be ashamed of himself. So we'll get this cheeky little contraption on, which is basically just a balance stop, which has made us believe that this was some sort of chronograph, stopwatch. You can see it's having an effect on the balance immediately. And that's all it does really. Stops the balance and starts it again. Simple as that. And it's just that little pin there that just butts up against the balance wheel and stops it from moving. Just pour a little bit of grease on the spring, and then we'll just operate it and get it around that post. Like so. Can wipe off the rest. So the amplitude looks really good, but I've got multiple lines. Manipulate that spring so there's a bit more room for it on this side, so it doesn't bounce back onto itself. The spring does look a bit strange here, doesn't it? So you can see there's no screw to remove that stud, so I might have to pull out the whole spring. So without unpinning the hairspring, I'm going to try and push out that stud because it is just friction fitted. Wish me luck. And that should do it, I think. So you can see how that hairspring is sitting. The coils are so close together around here. I think there might be a little problem here somewhere. So I'm going to try and push this in and sort out that kink here. While I'm at it, I'm also going to twist that collet a little bit to get the beat error a bit closer. See how that goes. It's a bit narrow just here. So instead of getting a single pair of lines for the tick and the torque of the impulse spin, I was getting 3 sets of lines. Looking closely at the way my hairspring was vibrating, it seemed like half of the hairspring was having a day off and the other half was drunk, bumping into things. I was also unsure whether my timograph was having some difficulty understanding what this movement was saying, because it was reading 3 ticks and 3 torques almost simultaneously. So I fiddled around with the hairspring to get the sleepy half to vibrate and the drunk half to stop knocking into itself. And here is the moment we've all been waiting for, the cameo of our one jewel. Just this one little jewel here. So just make the most of it and put some oil on it. So after back and forth, the 3 sets of lines were looking better and I managed to get the beat error looking good, but I was still getting 3 sets of lines. The fork on my palette looked a little bent, so I decided to adjust that slightly, and I also unpinned the hairspring to feed a bit more length into the arena. I did lose the little brass wedge, but I stuck a temporary piece of brass shaving in there until I could make another one. In the end, I managed to get a single set of lines, but the problem was my timographer just wasn't able to calculate a rate. And you can see those lines are so close together, yet it's telling me that my beat error is way out. So there's no point in me doing anything further if my timographer is not going to tell me the truth.
You can't handle the truth!
Okay, so I did have issues getting this movement out because of these pushes. So I want to get everything in and then put the dial on after and the hands. So you can see these pushes. There's no gaskets or seals or anything. It's just a hole in the wall. And that's it really. We've got this little spring here. And the actual operating levers are here. Looks quite nice like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Why don't you keep it like that and then put the numbers on? Let me think of one.
So after all that, we still haven't discussed what the heck a calograph is. The dial also has a tachymeter scale in the center, and we all know what that is, right? Yeah, right. 99 out of 100 of us still don't know what that means. But anyway, I think calograph is just a fancy made-up model name because the dial clearly shows a telemeter scale on the outer perimeter, which is a way to calculate the distance between the watch, i.e. the wearer, and an event at a distance. So basically it's like when you see a lightning strike and then you count in seconds how long it takes for you to hear the sound of that lightning strike, i.e. the thunderclap, because sound is a bit lazy and travels slower than light. Then you can figure out how many kilometers away that lightning strike was so you can get out of Dodge. And the tachymeter scale allows you to calculate the average speed as long as you know the distance covered. So if you know that a car is traveling from point A to point B is 1 kilometers and it takes 30 seconds to travel that distance, then you know the car was traveling at 120 kilometers an hour. So you can see here just above the 6, which is 30 seconds, it indicates 120. And those were really handy scales to have on a watch, I guess, in the days without Casio databanks and iPhones. Now to hide that rash on the case back, I've decided to go with the NATO strap today. And that's all there is to say about this one really. Thank you all for watching and I hope you've enjoyed this episode and found it useful. If you have, then please like, share and subscribe to the channel. This watch has taught us that it's not always glamour, rubies and perlage in the art of horology. Sometimes it's just some brass and some screws. But this watch can still proudly be used by any referee to officiate a football match. But don't expect the game to finish on time, and you may get struck by lightning every now and again. Look after yourselves, folks, and look after each other. I'm always praying for peace, justice and freedom for you all. And if the Almighty wills, I'll see you on the next one. Ta-ra a bit.